And at that time, Savannah was 80 miles away on a 2-lane highway. Mm-hmm. And so I took the sizes, and the bass man went with me. He was a staff sergeant. He actually outranked me. He played bass for me. So we get over there, and he said, if you any kind of band leader, you get us on television. And we walked under this sign that said WSAV TV. I said, follow me. So we caught an elevator and got off right in front of the receptionist's desk. And this slow-talking, pretty Southern girl said, may I help you? And I said, no, I want to see the wheel. I want to see the guy that runs this place. And she said, oh, he's back there. Before she could say in conference, I said, thank you. And I walked right by her and walked into a business meeting. Whew. Yeah.
That went well.
Oh, yeah. All of them sitting around this conference table, and this guy looked up and he said, who are you and what can I do for you? And I kind of smiled at him. I said, I'm Jerry Foster, and you can put me on television. And he said, what have you got? I said, I got the best country band you ever heard. He said, you know what? We've only been on the air for about 6 weeks, and we're actually looking for a country band.
Wow.
What do you have? And I said, well, he said, before you tell me, let me ask you what you don't have. Do you have a fiddle in the band? And I said, no, but I got Bill Haley's drummer. And he said, well, if you got the show, would you object if we gave you a fiddle player? And I said, not as long as he's great. Well, this kid they gave us was 17 years old. His name was Rudy Thomas, and he played one heck of a hoedown fiddle. But on Friday night, he played first violin for the Savannah Symphony.
Oh, wow.
So he really gave me a great musician. But hey, we weren't sure. He said, what do you do? And I said, I'm in the Marines. He said, oh, Lord, if you had a show on Saturday, could you do it? And of course, the answer is always yes. And I said, of course. And he said, can you come back Wednesday night at 8 o'clock and audition? And I said, yeah. Well, one of my guys caught the duty, and the other one was restricted for a couple of days. I showed up with 3 pieces. I'd never been in a television studio in my life, and it was a 3-camera shoot. And I did 2.5 songs. I got halfway through the 3rd song, and he waved at me to stop. He said, you start Saturday. You're on from 5:30 to 6. And I said, cool. Wow. I stayed on for about 2 years.
Talking about making your own opportunities, right?
Well, I got out of the Marines in February of '57, and I had a TV show, so I walked right out of the Marine Corps uniform into the band uniforms we were wearing on television. So, yeah. And by then we were already playing the Bamboo Ranch, which seats 650 people. It was the biggest club in Savannah, but so it happened pretty fast.
That's awesome.
Well, since we're talking about the 50s.
Don't bring me up. I was born in the 50s.
I found out just recently, thanks to Jerry, that Wikipedia has a mistake.
Oh, really? Yeah, it does.
They have Jerry credited for being co-writer on Chantilly Lace.
Oh, really?
And to my understanding, he's not.
No. The guy who wrote Chantilly Lace, you said that got me as a co-writer with him, actually was the Big Bopper.
Right.
J.P. Richardson, who also wrote White Lightning and Running Bear. He had some pretty big records. Mm-hmm. What happened was Bill Rice and I wrote together for like 18 years, okay? And we had a hit with Jerry Lee Lewis, and I'm trying to remember which one it was, whether it was Think About It, Darling, or Would You Take Another Chance on Me?
I'm trying to remember which hit. Which hit did he have with Jerry Lee Lewis? Did you hear that, folks?
Jerry Lee cut 21 of our songs. So, yeah. But this was one of the number ones, and I think it was the flip side of Think About It, Darling, and it was Chantilly Lace. Mm-hmm. And so, but our side went number 1 country. The other side went pretty far up the charts in the pop charts. And I think what happened was, I don't know who made the mistake, but some way I got credit with co-writers on both songs. Bill Rice and I wrote the A side that went number 1 country. And the Bopper wrote the other one by himself. He didn't really need me. But there is a story about that song, about how it was born. It was really funny because J.P. was quite a songwriter. Mm-hmm. He was also a disc jockey in Beaumont, Texas. And he called himself the Big Yazoo on the radio.
Okay.
So, and he was already having some success as a writer. So there was a kid that liked one of his songs, and he put him on an airplane that afternoon to fly him to New York to record his song. He and Bill Hall, who later became my publisher. He was managing a Big Bopper at that time. So they decided to sit down and have a few drinks after the plane left. And I guess Jape had enough to start thinking maybe he ought to be an artist. And he said, you know what? He said, I think I could sing that song better than that kid that we just put on the airplane. So I think Holland had about as many beers as he did. And he said, well, why don't we just call Gold Star over in Houston and book the studio and take you over and cut a session? He said, okay. So he called and they put some musicians together. While they were en route, the people at the studio called a band, I guess, and some people, but they were about halfway over there, and JP was going to cut the song that he put the kid on the plane to sing, right? And Bill Hall, he said, he was about halfway over to Houston, and he said, hey, Jape, ain't a record supposed to have two sides? And he said, yeah. And he said, well, what are we going to put on the other side? And JP was looking in the magazine with an ad for Chantilly Lace.
Okay.
And he sat in the car, and halfway between Beaumont and Houston, he wrote Chantilly Lace.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But that was supposed to be the B-side. It was called You Know What I Like when he wrote it. It wasn't Chantilly Lace, but that's where he got the idea.
Wow. So
they went in the studio, and Hall said they had about 16 cuts on You Know What I Like. And every one of them was different because Jape kept adding and subtracting from what he had written. So anyway, they did the session and had an acetate made and dropped it off to a radio station where the jock was a friend of Jape's because they were both disc jockeys in South Texas. And he said, would you mind playing this thing and we'll give you a buzz in a couple of days and could you bring us up to date on, what kind of response you got? And they were pushing the other side. Mm-hmm. So when they called the disc jockey, he said, well, I don't know about whatever the name of the other side was. Nobody remembers anymore. He said, but Chantilly Lace is getting calls like crazy. So there's where the name came from. The disc jockey renamed it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, actually,
it was no longer You Know What I Like. It was Chantilly Lace.
The A side was The Purple People Eater Meets the Witch Doctor.
Is that what it was?
That was the A side.
I never did know what it was.
Jason knows all that stuff.
Well, the guy that had the Purple People Eater in the first place was Sheb Woolley.
Correct.
And I had a song, he got one of my songs on an album called Wine, Women, and Song called The Fight. And later in the show, I'll do it for you if you want me to.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Well, we're going to do a novelty record show coming up here at the end of the month, all novelty. So Sheb Woolley is going to be a big part of that with Ben Colder.
Yep, that was his alter ego.
And we've actually, I was going to make this a surprise, but I'll announce it. I have touched base with Sheb's daughter.
Really?
And she is going to call into the station that day and talk a little bit about her father while we're doing the vinyl show. So
I loved him to death, man. He became a good friend. He and I read for a lot of different movie parts. And he was telling me he read for Giant. He went to read for Giant. He thought he was going to be Jet Rink, which was James Dean. Sheb is all through that movie, but he doesn't have a line. But he shot the whole thing. He said, I made a lot of money with that. They didn't say a word.
He was in a lot of Westerns.
Oh, yeah. High Noon, for one.
Yeah. I just saw him on Bonanza. He was in Bonanza just the other day. My dad watches MeTV all the time. He loves all the old Westerns, Bonanza and Big Valley and all that.
He had a big role in Rawhide.
Did he?
Yeah, he sure did.
Wow. Another one of my faves, though, is Clint Eastwood in there.
Oh, yeah.
He just turned 88.
Yeah. Really? Is he that old?
Clint Eastwood is 88.
I thought I'd caught him, but I guess I'm not.
Uh-oh.
I'm
Jerry,
on my way,
but your wife's laughing. I don't know if that's good or not.
Well, I think she thought I caught him too.
Jerry, why don't we go ahead and play a song?
Okay, you want to hear what I was talking about? The fight?
Yes.
Let's fight.
Okay, this is.
Let me get you the mix.
Oh, got to get him turned up.
You got to get me turned up? Is that like a turn up?
All I know is you got an absolute beautiful Gibson guitar.
Thank you very much. It was a wedding present for my wife.
Well, she's got great taste.
Yes. This is a. I'm sorry?
You got your volume on? Oh, there it is.
Oh, it has to be plugged in. I forgot.
There we go.
This is a Bob Dylan signature model Gibson, and they only made 500 of these. We didn't know that when she got it, but
wow.
Come to find out that's what it was.
It is beautiful.
Anyway, this has got beautiful lyric. You really have to pay attention. I was standing on a corner across an alley from downtown, minding everybody's business but my own, when along came a short, sort of skinny little runt, the kind that looked harmless to pick on. I began our conversation by telling him, oh, well, what the heck? And telling him he sure did look a sight. And knowing I could whip him, I let him stand right there and talk big old me into the fight. First I took my big old face and smashed him in the fist, and I hit him till my nose was just a wreck. Then I placed my head firmly in his hands, and I began to wring them with my neck. With my big old mouth, I bit him in the shoe till my dying day. I won't know why. Then from a prone position, I looked right up at him, and I poked him in the finger with my eye. With my mangled fingers, I reached up from out the dust, asked him if he thought he'd had enough. I thought it fair to warn him that we'd better discontinue before I really started getting rough. I didn't hear his answer. I laid down and went to sleep, just to prove how unafraid I was. But if another little fella ever tries to pick on me, I'm gonna do some thinking before he does.
Very nice.
Oh,
very nice.
still don't remember that last half a line.
We'll play it for you that day.
Oh, I got Anheuser's.
So, Jerry, you started talking about you were playing music as you were in the Marine Corps. About how old were you when you really kind of got bitten by the bug? When was
Well, my dad taught me a few chords on the guitar when I was probably 6 or 7 years old.
Okay.
And we had family reunions. We went to church on Sundays, and in fact, we went to church, seemed to me like every day. Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening rather, and Wednesday night. But usually after the Sunday morning service, we'd go to one of our relatives' house, and almost all my relatives on my dad's side could play something.
Mm-hmm.
My dad played guitar. He played French harp. He played piano and organ. In fact, he played the organ at the church.
Okay.
So he just taught me a few notes on the guitar when I was about 6 or 7. But they'd let me sing with them, and I don't know why they did, but they did. I guess maybe I looked mean or something. I don't know what it was. But my great uncle played a fiddle, and he was about 6'4", 6'5". And that fiddle looked like a matchbox. I mean, his neck, he was so tall. But and one of the cousins played piano, another one played dobro. My dad played guitar. And my mother couldn't play anything because that side of my family was not musically inclined, so they taught her to play spoons. But she was a showman. She'd jump all over the place with those spoons, keeping rhythm. So it's really cool. But that's kind of where it started for me. And then when I got into high school, I had a guitar. The strings were so high on it, I had calluses you wouldn't believe.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And afraid to break a string, we didn't have enough money to replace it, so I just kind of worked it easy. But my senior year, I needed music class credit to graduate, and I never learned to read music because I was too busy doing other stuff. But I was winning talent shows for them at different schools, and I'd do an old Peppermint Harris song, and I'd fill a vodka bottle half full of orange juice and wear a suit and tie. By the time I finished the act, the suit was half off and the tie was undone, the guitar was crazy, and the music teacher played piano, and he also played in an orchestra on the side. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I got my credit and managed to graduate from high school was by winning talent shows. But I could write. When I was in junior high school, the people, upperclassmen, would come and pay me 10 cents, 15 cents, quarter, whatever they had in their pocket. That's what I charged them, because they'd have a poetry assignment. And I'd write most of the poems, and they'd put their name on it and turn it in. So, and then I'd take the money and go down to the pool hall and shoot Crazy Eight. And either I won a little money or I didn't eat that day. So a lot of days I didn't eat. I wasn't that good a pool player, but I was a little bit of a gambler. But anyway, that's kind of where it started. And then my senior year in high school, they had a contest, and it was national. And I won they picked my song and published it. The first time I was published nationally was a poem called Stars. And it was in a book that was shipped to all the high schools called Young America Sings.
Okay.
So that was my first publication. However, I took art too. I thought, I can't read music, I might as well try to draw something. I wasn't very good at that either. But when I turned in the drawing, I'd write a poem on the back. I'd say, when I painted this, I sat in a chair, and then I went home and had a nightmare. So they started running the poems in the city newspaper that was on the back of my art. So I got a little notoriety locally from that. Wow. But that's kind of where it started. Then when I got in the Marine Corps, I missed playing, and some of the guys I kind of put together, and we just got together and started playing, and one thing led to another. Then when I got out, like I told you, I had a television show already, and a guy came in one night, and he said, you got any original songs? And I said, well, yeah, I got one or two. And he said, why don't you sing one of them for us? And so I said, okay. So I announced that I was going to sing a song that I had written, and the band was going to stumble through it with me. Well, I got halfway through it, and he was sitting with this real pretty brunette. They got up in the middle of it and left. And I thought, well, okay, I'll never sing that song anymore. Wow. So next night he came back by himself, and he said, would you sing that song again? And I said, well, I don't know why you'd want to hear it. You didn't care much about it last night. And he said, no, I was with my wife, and she's got a lot of Indian blood, and she can't drink. And she was getting to a point where she gets violent. So I took her home before we made a scene. Well, that guy wound up, he had a scar in his eyebrow from Iwo Jima.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was in the Marines in World War II. And he was working for a distributor out of Atlanta, Georgia. And that, in those days, they took records around the radio stations, and you could actually get in to play a record for somebody.
Right.
And then he sold them to record stores. And he said, if you will sign with me to manage you, I'll get you a record deal. And I said, you know how many times I've heard that a week here? I said, you get a record deal and we'll talk about me signing with you. He said, can you come to my house tomorrow afternoon? And I said, yeah. So I came over, and I didn't know if he was made a call to time and temperature and was a one-sided conversation I was hearing, but I heard him say, this kid's really good, and if you don't sign him, RCA will, and they're coming in town next week. And then he said, yeah, right, goodbye. And so he turned around and said, your contract's being airmailed tomorrow. And it got there.
Did
and
it
it was,
really?
yeah, it was with Backbeat Records. Little did I know that I was the only white guy on a black label. And we go to Houston, Texas to cut the record, and I looked at the guitar player and I said, man, you look familiar. Have I seen you somewhere before? Have I played with you somewhere? And he said, Jerry, you ever see the movie The Girl Can't Help It? And I said, yeah. He said, man, we Little Richard's band. That's us you saw in the movie. Little Richard had seen Sputnik going over, and they were on tour down in Australia.
Oh, wow.
And he thought it was the end of the world. And he said he got down on his knees and said, Lord, if you'll forgive me, I'll preach, and I'll get rid of this rock and roll band. And he threw his diamonds in the bay. And later he wanted to come, when he found out what it was that went over, he wanted to call divers to get his diamonds back. So we'll never find those things, man. They're probably halfway to China by now. But I had some good luck with him. And the guy that produced that session was a guy named Joe Scott. Joe produced Pledging My Love, which was the R&B record of the year with Johnny Ace about 3-4 years before that. So he was really a good producer. Everything was under one roof. The record company, he had a booking agency and a talent agency and a pressing plant. And it used to be a big nightclub called the Peacock. And Little Richard was one of the guys that was working there as an artist. And he tried to get him a record deal. Nobody would sign him. So the guy's name was Don Roby. So he started Peacock Records for Little Richard.
Oh, wow.
So Little Richard's first record was on that label. Then he went with Specialty, where all the hits were. But I didn't mean to talk the whole thing about
No,
that's how I got
what you're
started.
here for.
Anyway, that's how I got started. That started the whole thing for me. And I was 26 with a bullet in the R&B charts, and they ran a picture of me. And the next week, I wasn't in anybody's charts. But I got to tell you something funny about the tour. This record came out in late '58, my first record. And like I said, the musicians were Little Richard's musicians, and they sent the CD, and they sent the tape to Nashville and overdubbed the Jordanaires doing the background vocals on the A side.
Wow.
And this thing, like I said, was 26 with a bullet. And they had me on a tour of like radio stations. I'd go in and talk, and they'd play the record, and I'd do the television shows in the cities. And in those days, they didn't have tracks, so you lip sync, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I had done Memphis, Nashville, Little Rock. In fact, when I did Memphis, Wink Martindale was a local video jock there.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think it was called Dance Party. So that was the first place I started. I did Little Rock, and I came to Nashville and did the things in Nashville. And I got to Chattanooga, and the other artist on the show was the late Richie Valens. Wow. And it was a clip of him doing La Bamba. The odd thing about that plane crash, it happened while I was on that tour. And later, like I said, pretty quick, Richie and I did that thing. He was the guest. And then the Big Bopper, of course, he was getting sick, and he called his manager, Bill Hall. 15 years I spent with Bill Hall as a staff writer. This was after the plane crash. He became a publisher, and he published Bill Rice and me for 15 years. And he talked to Waylon out of letting him use the seat because the Bopper was getting kind of sick.
Right.
And Waylon and I became friends in '62 and stayed friends till he died. When I went in the Hall of Fame, I went in with Buddy Holly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the guy that flipped the coin was Richie Valens, was Tommy Alsop, and Tommy signed me to Metro Media and produced me for 3 years. So everybody on that airplane touched my life in some way. And my square with my name in it, and the song they used to identify me was I'll Think of Something, down on Fifth Avenue in Nashville. The square right next to me is Buddy Holly.
Oh, wow.
And there's a story behind that as well, if I'm not mistaken. I'll Think of Something.
Oh, yeah.
There's a story there. You're going to have to
Well,
bring up.
that
Yeah.
story, it
Yeah.
was really weird because Bill Rice and I, we wrote this in '74. And Bill Rice and I had written a song that morning. And Bill had moved at some point to Dixon, and he was living like 40 miles south of Nashville. And I was living across the street from Hank Williams' house. It wasn't a big drive for me to get back to the office. So I was in an office, and the guy was talking and setting up times to meet with some competitors. And I said, what are you going to do if they all show up at the same time? He said, golf. I said, I don't know. I'll think of something. And I said, can I borrow your phone? And I called Rice, and I said, you got to come back in. We got to write tonight. Things just started running through my head. I had nothing in the world to do with what he was talking about, but that title I'd heard a jillion times before that. But that's the first time it registered to me with a picture. And images started running through my mind. So Bill argued with me about 15 or 20 minutes, and finally he said, okay, I'll meet you at 8 o'clock at the writer's room. And I said, okay. So we had a key to the building and a key to our writer's room, of course. So we're back there scribbling, and we're almost finished because I pretty much had the lyric solidified by the time Bill got there, and we were kind of working toward the end of the song. And almost there was a knock on the door, and I thought it was the janitor because he used to come in and clean up at night. And I said, Bill, don't lose place where you are. We're almost finished with this thing. I'll just go tell the guy he can come back tomorrow or some other time. We need to finish this song. So I opened the door, and it was Jim Vino. And his office was right down the hall from us. And he said, Buster, when you guys finish that song, I think you're calling it I'll Think of Something. He said, have Rice put it on a piece of tape, prop it up against my door, and then slide the lyric underneath the door. I'm going to cut that on Hank Jr. tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. And I said, how did you know what we were doing? He said, man, everything y'all doing is going up your air conditioning duct, which was right over our writer's table, and it's coming down right over my desk. And I said, boy, it's a good thing we're not talking about you like we usually are. We'd never get another record cut. So he did cut it on Hank, and it was the first time Hank had been inside the top 10. He went to 7 with it in 1974. And 18 years later, Mark Chestnut discovered it because that was one of his dad's favorite songs. And he was playing in his band, so he learned the song. And Sheila Shipley told me that she and Mark Wright were scouting him as, about a contract with MCA. And she said, if we sign him, he's got to do that song. And they didn't know who wrote it or who published it. So when he came in to record it, Rob Hadjakis played fiddle on that song. And I was talking to him one day, and I said, you know what, he took a song that was 2 minutes and 20 seconds or something on Hank Jr., and somehow it wound up 4 minutes and 11 seconds. He said, no, Jerry, that's where we faded it. He said, we played that song for almost 11 minutes. And finally, Mark Wright walked in and said, this can't be the whole album, guys. We got to stop it somewhere. So they just started jamming, and they got into the song. I would love to hear what they threw away. I would love to.
And you never got a chance?
No, I never. No, when they faded it, I don't know what happened to it. But I tell you one thing, he sure killed that song. He really did a great job with it. Hank Jr. did a good job too, and then of course Chestnut took it to #1 for us. And
now, was the Hank Jr., was that your first real big hit? Was that your
no,
first one?
our first big hit was "The Day the World Stood Still" by Charlie Pride.
Right. Charlie Pride, okay.
And the follow-up to "The Day the World Stood Still" by Charlie was "Easy Part's Over." That was our first award winner. We wound up with 17 cuts on Charlie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Used to, if you had a hit with them, they kept coming back. I think the artist that we had the most cuts on was probably Johnny Paycheck. We had 24 cuts on Paycheck. We wrote 7 of the first 9 hits he had.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you ever dream when you were a child in high school that you're going to be having hits on probably names you don't even know they weren't even big yet. Charlie Pride wasn't big yet,
No,
Johnny
he
Paycheck wasn't big yet, but still it's the idea.
But I'll tell you who was. Kitty Wells and she cut the Easy Part's Over as a cover tune when Charlie had it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other cut on it was Louis Armstrong.
Huh.
I think we had 5 or 6 cuts. I think Jimmy Payne did that too in an album.
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
sure.
on the album there.
But we had a lot of cuts on that song. But some of the artists later that recorded some of our songs were artists that I had heard when I was a kid. Wow. And it just knocked me out. Hank Thompson cut a couple of our tunes, and and I think, wow, I used to listen to him when I was picking cotton, man. In high school.
I got to play, and I cannot remember his name, so I'm not even going to try to make it up. I played with one of Kitty Wells' guitar players a long time ago, way back. And I could see him to this day, what he looks like then, but I cannot remember his name. But
I got to tell you about my band.
Okay.
I have a new band, and I call them the Retrofits.
We've had one of his band members on our show.
Okay.
We've had one of his band members.
Which
on
one's
the show.
that?
Who did you have?
Now you're making me think, and my mind went blank just like
There
that.
you go.
See,
We'll let Jerry do that.
Next time I do the fight, I'll remember that first line. Well, the piano player is Kent Goodson, and Kent spent 28 years with George Jones, and I think the last 5 years he was his band leader.
Wow.
The bass player is Joe Reed. Joe played with Haggard for 8 years. The drummer is Ricky Randolph. He played with Michael
There it
McDonald, Percy Sledge,
There he is.
and the Allman Brothers.
Yes.
And the guitar player is Steve McComb. He played with Fifth Dimension, He played with the Drifters and the Crystals. So it's a pretty eclectic group, and they all sing.
Now,
bet that's great.
Are your songs kind of based around rockabilly? Do you have a feel of that style in your music with the band?
Yeah, well, we just finished. We closed at the Palace last Saturday night, and our show was basically a rockabilly show.
Okay.
And I only did about just a few songs that I had written, but I went back to kind of where I started, like Lottie Miss Claudia and Staggerly. I did some. Lloyd Price wrote both those songs, as well as Personality, and I did shows with him back in the day. And when my first record was out, we did a show in Baltimore, man, and come to find out, remember I told you I was the only white guy on a black label? I was the only white guy on that show, too, and I didn't know it.
Is that what led you toward the King of Rock and Roll? I know at one point, I don't know if that was when you were in the service, and tell us a little bit about the time you had that hamburger. You shared that hamburger. Can you tell me a little about that?
I got accused of imitating Elvis, and I said, I'm a Marine in the daytime, and I play at night. I don't get to watch much television, so I'd never seen Elvis Presley. But we were doing a lot of his songs because, he was hot as a pistol.
Right.
And we're, like I told you, I had a TV show, so we were playing at that club, seat 650 people. We were doing a whole lot of Elvis songs. And he came to play the sports arena in Savannah. And this was in June 1956. And I talked to the mayor. And because I had a television show, he got me in because it was sold out. And I stood about 20 feet from the stage and watched Elvis do 2 shows. Now, little did I know that 13 years later that would be my band, but it was.
Oh, wow.
Scotty and DJ traveled with me. Bill Black was dead. And the Jordanaires traveled with me some, too.
DJ just passed away.
Yeah, he just did, man. Yeah. Scotty went a couple of years ago in June, and then DJ did a week or so ago.
Yep.
Passed.
Yep. How long has Bill Black been a while?
Bill died pretty quick. Yeah. He had a brain tumor the size of a walnut. He kept having headaches, and he was working the studio where they cut Tragedy down in Memphis and playing a little bass. He put a little combo together called the Bill Black Combo, and he had a couple of hits. White Silver Sands was one of them, but and so he was still touring a little bit on his own. But Elvis let the band go. I think he put them back together for just briefly after he got out of the Army. Then he started with a bigger band.
Right.
And
James Burton and all that.
Yeah, all those guys. And anyway, I saw the show. Then after the show, I went and picked up my drummer and my guitar player, and we were on the way back to the base. And we, a little ways out of Savannah, we stopped and walked into this little restaurant, and we were the only car in the parking lot. So walked in, and there was one waitress, and her hair was whiter than mine. And she didn't know who anybody was and could care less, I don't guess. So the guitar player and I walked in together, and my drummer that I told you played with Haley, right. He was asleep in the back seat of the car. And so I'd ordered 2 cheeseburgers, order of fries, and a Pepsi, and she brought me the Pepsi. And then by the time I had ordered that, Elvis walked in with his 2 cousins. I don't know where in the world they came from. It's got to be 2 o'clock in the morning. And I spoke to him, and I said, haven't you been doing some shows up in southeast part of Missouri? And he said, yeah. I said, that's where I'm from. I told him I was in the Marine Corps, and I said, I saw your show tonight, and I mean literally I saw it. I didn't hear a word you said. Those little girls were screaming so loud. He started laughing. He said, the show's always in the audience. And I told him, I said, well, I've got a television show every Saturday here. And next time you come through, I'd love to have you stop and do a couple of tunes if you'd like to do that. And he said, I'd love to do that. And I said, would you like to sit down? And his cousins had already gone to a table on past us. He said, yeah. So he came out and he sat down next to me. And about that time, the waitress swooped down and she said, what would you like? And he said, 2 cheeseburgers, order of fries, and a Pepsi. So not very long after that, she comes out with these 2 cheeseburgers, order of fries. We both got Pepsis. And she said, who gets this? And both at the same time said, I do. And I said, Elvis, that's my order. I'll split it with you. I'll let you have a cheeseburger. You can nibble at my fries till yours get here, and then I want my cheeseburger back because I'm starving. And he said, a deal's a deal, man. And we sat there, and he wanted to tell me about his audition with the movies. That's what he wanted to talk about. And I said, do you know what movie you're going to do? And he said, yeah, I'm going to do a movie called The Rainmaker. And I said, oh, well. And, of course, he didn't. It was Love Me Tender. The reason he didn't do Rainmaker was it didn't have any music in it, and Tom Parker wasn't going to let him do anything that he couldn't do a soundtrack with.
Right.
But it was really weird because in '92 I started taking acting lessons, and the first monologue they gave me was from The Rainmaker. And I said, Elvis is still messing with me. But we got ready to leave, and he asked me if I knew the way to Charlotte. And I said, yeah, because he's playing there the next night. And I told him how to get there. And I said, Elvis, better yet, I'm getting ready to leave too. And I said, why don't you just follow me and I'll turn my blinker on where you turn off. And he said, okay. And so he picked up a container, one of these plastic containers with these little plastic combs. And he used to have a little piece of tape on the side that either say 5 cents or 10 cents. This didn't have a price on it. So he picked up the container and he asked this old waitress, nobody else in there but her. And he said, how much are these? And she said, well, I don't even know how many's in there. he looked at me and winked and he said, well, $10 ought to cover it. That's like $100 today.
Yeah.
And that was her tip.
Wow.
So he just bought the whole container. And I said, Elvis, I wonder if you'd do me a favor. And he said, what? And I said, I'd like you to meet my drummer. He said, I can't do that, man. And I said, what do you mean you can't do that? He's going to kill me tomorrow. He said, Jerry, what did you say to me? And I said, I'd like you to meet my drummer. He cut Rock Around the Clock with Bill Haley. He said, I'll be glad to. He said, I thought you said you wanted me to meet a woman. He said, I've been running from old women over in Savannah all night long. So I took him out and introduced him, and Chuck woke up, and I said, Chuck, this is Elvis Presley. Elvis is my drummer, Chuck Hagler. Chuck looked up with one eye half shut and the other closed, and he said, oh, Elvis. He went right back to sleep. Next day, didn't even remember meeting him.
Oh, no.
No. And so Elvis followed us about, I guess, 8-10 miles, and I'm doing about 70. And the lights blinked, and he came around me, and he blinked the lights twice. And that's the last time I saw Elvis, because I saw 2 taillights in the dark doing about 100 miles an hour, and it looked like somebody smoking 2 cigarettes walking away from us. But he did call, his producer was Felton Jarvis, and he did call my publisher, Bill Hall, in 1976 in December. And Felton told Bill Hall, he said, Elvis wants a Foster and Rice song. He wants them to tailor him a song like he used to do. And he said, he knows me, they know me. And so Hall said, okay. So he ran me down, and it was Saturday night, and he said, you got to write tomorrow. Get a hold of Bill Rice. And I said, tomorrow's Sunday, Colonel. Oh, he said, yeah, but this is, you guys got to tailor a song for Elvis, and it's got to be FedExed Monday morning in order to be in Memphis, because Wednesday's a deadline. So I got a hold of Bill Rice, and I said, we got to write tomorrow. Told him why. So we came in and wrote this song, and it went out FedEx Monday morning. And Felton called back. When some other writers had heard about that Elvis was looking for songs, and I insisted on sending some songs as well. So Felton called Bill Hall Wednesday and said, we got the songs, but Elvis didn't like any of them. And he said, well, they all tried. And he said, except the Foster and Rice song. He loves it. He came in to record it and got sick. They had Creative Workshop booked for a week. Mm-hmm. And Elvis got sick. He was in town 2 hours. And he flew back to Memphis and never got in the studio again.
Oh, wow.
No, never did. And that song's been cut 4 or 5 times. I just cut it on a #1 Elvis tribute artist in London a couple of years ago. He sounds like Elvis, but nobody's Elvis.
No.
So it didn't work. We thought it would, but it didn't. We thought the story would carry it. Mm-hmm. The fact that Elvis actually did come in to record it. What was really weird was Bob Luman's an old rockabilly throwback. He said he wanted to be a baseball player. In fact, Pittsburgh's Pirates scouted Bob Lumen.
Mhm.
He was a pretty good ball player. And he said, but I took my girlfriend to see this kid named Elvis Presley. He had one green sock, one purple sock, and he's shaking all over the place. And my girlfriend went crazy. He said, I ain't playing baseball. That's what I'm going to do. So he got into the music business. So the town kind of heard about that song. But everybody knew that Elvis had a hold on that song. But Lumen kept saying, give that song to me. And I said, Bob, I can't give you that song. Lumen cut 15 of our songs, by the way. We had some hits with him.
Mm-hmm.
But I was getting a haircut about 2 blocks away from the writer's room, and the radio was on, and I heard him say, Elvis died today in Memphis. By the time I got back to the office, Bob Lumen was standing at the writer room door, and he said, you ain't going to cut that song now. He said, give it to me. It's been cut about 5 times, and nobody has hooked it. They can't even chart it. I don't know why.
In a while.
It's a really good song, but I don't do it. Don't look at me.
It was made for Elvis.
Yes, it was.
Made,
it was tailored for one person, and that person loved it
Yep.
well enough to come in to record it and just didn't quite make it.
It's just the fate of the business sometimes, you know.
I talked to Lamar Fike because it was getting late in the day because we gave him that song in late December, right before New Year's.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this was about 2 weeks before he died.
Mm-hmm.
I ran down Lamar Fike, who was his light man on the road, and claimed he was his cousin. Elvis said, no, he's just a little fat kid that jumped over the fence when I lived on Ottoman Drive and never went home. So, but anyway, I said, Lamar, if Elvis isn't going to cut that song, I said, I'm losing friends, man, and some people are producing hits for us are asking about that song for some of their artists. And he said, Jerry, don't do it. He said, I've heard him do it at Graceland. He said he's worked it up, and he said, man, that's going to be a big record for you guys, but if you let somebody else cut it, he'll never cut another one of your songs. And of course, he died before he could record it.
Yeah.
But, it made us feel good to know that he liked it that much.
Oh, yeah.
And, Elvis was one of the nicest people I ever met. I saw no signs of any conceit at all. It was like 2 old country boys talking about their cotton crop,
And you saying that, Jerry, that we've been in the music business a long time, especially all of us together. But, I've met a lot of artists. I've met a lot of people who met a lot of famous people like yourself, what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. The two that always comes to mind, and they're not angels, and even documented, even themselves, they're not angels, but people that say they were really super nice, really friendly, was Elvis and Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
I've never heard really 2 negative things about how they were jerks or anything. They were just down-to-earth country folk. They just were blessed with great talent, took care of the people around them. And again, they weren't angels. They weren't perfect.
Nope.
But nobody is.
Nope.
And the 2 names that always come up that just want nice guys, and like where you're telling stories about Elvis, I've heard that over and over about Elvis Presley. And I'll tell you another one, a newer one, is Garth Brooks. I've heard nothing but great stuff from Garth Brooks. He just gave away 6 tickets to a guy who wanted tickets for his birthday, last year, one of the last concerts. And Garth's daughter drove past the house and said, all I want for my birthday is Garth Brooks tickets. And Garth showed up at the guy's door, knocked on the door, and said, here's 6 tickets, happy birthday.
Alan Reynolds was a good friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew Alan from the Memphis days. He and Dickie Lee were big buddies, and they were working with Jack Clement and Bill Hall. Mm-hmm. And of course, we were too. We used to got signed to them. Roland James got us in to see him. Roland, if you heard a whole lot of shaking going on, Great Balls of Fire and all that, that's Roland playing guitar on all the early Jerry Lee Lewis stuff. Okay. He became our guitar player, and he had a studio in Memphis. It was called Sonic. He found a kid named Harold Dorman and cut a song called Mountain of Love, and took off pretty good for him. And he followed it up with Move to Kansas City. And I said, well, what happened, Roland? And he said, man, and this was back in the days when stuff got pirated a lot. And he said, you ever try to eat 60,000 records without salt? He said, we sent out 20,000 records and got 40,000 more back than we mailed or moved to Kansas City. But anyway, he introduced us to Jack Clement and Bill Hall, and through them, I had known Alan. Well, Alan was producing Garth, and I had a theater in Branson in '88, and I came to Nashville to do the Ralph Emery show, the television show, and I ate at Kobe's, and I ran into Alan and Garth Brooks, and he had just released If Tomorrow Never Comes, and he was one of the nicest people I ever said hello to.
Wow.
And my wife knew him when he was working at a boot store in Hendersonville, wasn't it? Rivergate, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's Goodlettsville. Yeah. But and I watched him when Alan went into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Garth was the guy that introduced him. And I watched Garth before the show talk to an older lady about her grandchildren, and he must have talked to her for 30 minutes. So you're right.
Yeah.
He was one of those kind of people. I'll tell you, somebody else was really nice to me, and he could be temperamental, but not with me. He wasn't. It was Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh, okay.
And
Well,
I told you.
I've heard stories.
I've heard stories.
Yeah, I've heard stories.
Yeah.
There's a gentleman close by here, lives in Shelbyville, was one of Jerry's guitar players, and I cannot remember the name. But he's told stories, traveled with him for a short period of time. He said he auditioned for the band for Jerry Lee Lewis. He said the band members were all in this one room. He said Jerry walked in, opened the door, and said, "Just so y'all know, I'm the one." And he walked out. That's all he said, "I'm the one."
I got tickled at him. Rice and I had some number ones on him, and we had some pretty big records on Jerry Lee. And Earl Owens was a friend of mine, and he was kind of one of Jerry Lee's off-and-on managers or something. So he called me, and he said, the Killer's coming in about 2 o'clock, and he said, he wants to know if you guys would like to play him some songs. And I said, yeah, well, I'll put him in tape together. So I put hoping I'd get his ear for one of them anyway. And so I went over to Earl's office, and they queued up the tape. In those days, it was like a 7.5 reel-to-reel,
yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
And I put some stuff where I thought he might like from this, going by what some of the stuff he had cut for us. So I played the first song. When I walked in, he said, "Hey, Killer, don't you owe me some money?"
He called him Killer?
He called me Killer.
Killer.
He called everybody Killer, including himself.
Okay.
So when I walked in, he said, "Hey, Killer, don't you owe me some money?" And I said, "For what?" When he did Would You Take Another Chance on Me, he ad-libbed the end of it when he said, "Think about it, darling, think about it." Well, his producer called me and said, and I was on Mercury at the same time he was. We had the same producer. Jerry Kennedy called me and he said, "Foster, if you guys will write a really good song, call it Think About It, Darling," he said, "I'll see if I can get the Killer to cut it." So we did, and he did. So he had 2 number ones back to back on him, okay?
Wow.
So that's what he's talking about. When I walked in, "Don't you owe me some money?" And I said, "For what?" He said, "Did I give you a title?" And I said, "Did it go number 1?" And he said, "Yeah, it did." I said, "You want another number 1? Drop me another title, Jerry Lee." End of the story. He never mentioned it again. So we queued up the tape and played the first one, and he said, "Have you got my phone tapped?" And then they played the second one, and he said, "Are you reading my mail?" And the third one, he said, "Are you sleeping under my bed?" He had something like this to say after every song,
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I hope he likes one of these after all these remarks he's made. Well, I left after we played the 6, and I said, "Thanks for listening, and see you around." And I walked out. And when he went into the studio, he cut all 6 of them.
Oh,
That's
wow.
great.
Yeah.
That's wow.
That's great.
So,
Well, it's been a while since you've played a song.
oh God.
I have a request.
Uh-oh.
One of my favorite songs of yours is "Someone to Give My Love To."
Oh, okay. I'll try to do that if I can. This, by the way, is our most recorded song. Bill and I had 30 cuts on this thing.
Great song.
Which version you want? You want Robert Goulet's or Paychecks? I could search from now till the end of time and never find another you. I'm so glad because I know you're mine. So I want to give my love to. I believe, my love, that you're one of a kind. For there's no one else like you. You're the light of my life, so let it shine. So I want to give my love to. I find happiness is loving you. I'll do my best to make your dreams come true. I will follow you to the ends of the earth. For my place will be with you. I have taken you for better or worse. So I want to give my love to. I find happiness is loving you. I'll do my best to make your dreams come true. Days of man and wife time are precious few. I will spend them all with you. Then beyond forever I'll wait for you. Someone to give my love to. Thank you.
Very nice. Well, you were listening to the one and the only Mr. Jerry Foster. We got some people online. Want to say hello to our new friend. One of my special friends from Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Lynn Roll is on. Hello, Lynn. Glad to get to meet her last Saturday at the TSAI meeting up there in Nashville, Opry Mills Mall. Thank you for being part of the show. So, hi, Lynn. So,
I'm messing with this. Just go ahead.
he's playing a Chinese song, but we're so glad to have Mr. Foster on with us. He's got great stories, and of course, you know us. We love to hear fantastic stories and the history behind the music.
But the best part is these stories are true, not ones we made up.
Not one that we made. We made up some really good ones, but yeah. Now, you're talking about your affiliation with Jerry Lee Lewis. I think the cool thing, I got a chance to go to Memphis, I don't know, it'd be a couple of years now, and I was just blown away, first of all, the history of Sun Studios. You know,
Oh, yeah.
Just amazing to go in there and just think, Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee Lewis and Carl Perkins and all these guys, and just tons and tons. It was pretty cool that, and I didn't know it until that day, they showed the wall of, you got Elvis playing piano, and you got Johnny and Carl and Jerry there. I did not realize yet that Jerry Lee Lewis was not yet famous in that picture.
No, he was not.
He was just brought in to play piano on Carl Perkins' song.
That's right.
And just happened to be there. So everyone thinks they were all big celebrities then. Elvis was already out of Sun Studios. He was already with, what is it, Sony?
RCA.
RCA, yeah.
Yeah. So Elvis wasn't even part of the
No,
Sun
he drove
Studios.
by and saw Cash's car.
Yeah.
Cash saw Perkins' car and stopped.
Yeah.
And then Elvis saw Cash's car. But you remember what they said when Elvis turned around and they snapped the picture? What he had said?
I don't remember that.
He was telling the guys, he'd sat down to the piano and he had Don't Be Cruel out.
Okay.
And he said, I got covered on Don't Be Cruel. And he said, this guy did a great job on it. And
Yes.
and he said, what key did I do? And when he turned around to one of them said, what key did I do that? That's when he snapped it. He said, oh yeah, D. And he was bragging on Jackie Wilson,
That's it.
who cut,
They actually had the audio of that.
yeah.
there at Sun Studios. So you're right.
Well, they were
played that.
smart enough to do that. That's really something. They called a photographer, and then they kept the tape running.
Yes.
That was pretty cool. They didn't realize how much history they were actually doing.
I thought
yeah.
that was really cool. But yeah, I did not know that until that tour about Jerry wasn't even famous yet. He didn't.
No.
I think he just cut Great Balls of Fire, but it didn't come out yet. I don't think. I think he was recording it at the time.
I think Jack Clement talked to him and do a whole lot of shaking. He was doing Hank Williams stuff. You Win Again, that kind of stuff. And,
Okay.
And I think Clement talked him into doing some rockabilly.
Now another name that was there, Roy Orbison. You know, now you have some doings with Roy, right?
Yeah, I did a tour with Roy.
Uh huh.
Yeah, and that was a crazy tour. I had a #1 record in Europe.
Okay.
I cut a song that I put, like I told you, Scotty and DJ travel with me. And then when I was on Metro Media, I cut an album of songs that Elvis had done.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the songs that Elvis did in the 50s didn't even have drums, let alone the Jordanaires or keyboard. So I put together the piano player and Scotty and DJ and the piano player, and Lightning Chance played upright bass. He played almost all the Everly Brothers stuff. Okay. And Rolling Stones sent a reporter to cover the session because it was basically Elvis's old band back together, you know, and because Bill Black was dead, but the rest of them had worked with Elvis. And Scotty was producing it, and I said, Scotty, what's a song Elvis was always going to do that he never got around to recording? And he said, Don't Let Go. And I said, I know that song. Let's do it. And you play just like it was 1956. And he said, okay. And we got that thing and went #1 in Europe. And so I wound up getting a tour. We did 6 shows in 5 countries in 9 days. And the reason it was that way was we did 2 shows in Germany, 1 in Berlin and 1 in Frankfurt. Mm-hmm. And these were all 12,000-seat venues, and every one of them was sold out. But when you hear the lineup, you understand why. It was Roy Orbison, Jerry Lee Lewis, Marty Robbins, Jimmy C. Newman, Jeannie C. Riley, Chris Christopherson, me, and I had the Super Pickers, and I was the only one on that tour. Mel Tillis was on the first show, and then he left. But I was the only one on that tour that had a #1 record where we were at that time. And I thought it was really funny.
That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
but man, Orbison just has to be the greatest voice I have ever heard in person. The last show we did was in Switzerland, mm-hmm. Zurich. And I stood off out of the side of the audience because I just wanted to hear Orbison sing because he was later in this show. We were up earlier and he was closing. Mm-hmm. And man, back in those days, when the audience liked you, they lit cigarette lighters. Mm-hmm. I think now they use cell phones.
Yes.
But then it was cigarette lighters. And we were kicked it off in London. I thought they were trying to burn the auditorium down. And I said, what in the world? Because I didn't know what that was all about.
Yeah.
You know? But man, he just said, only, and all the lighters went, one word, you know, and I thought, man. Well, anyway, I had a guitar player named Bucky Barrett traveling with me. Henry Strzelecki was a heck of a bass man in Nashville, did a lot of sessions for a lot of big people, was my bass man, and Buddy Harmon, who actually played some with Elvis, was my drummer, and Barry Waltz played the keys. Well, Bucky comes up to me, and we're about, I guess, 3 shows in, and he said, Jerry, he said, Roy didn't want to upset you or do anything to make you feel bad. He said, but he said his guitar player has been over here so long he's homesick, and he said if you didn't mind, he would like for me to play with his set as well, and he would pay me. And I said, Bucky, that's a great thing, man, because all I'm going to do is this tour. I'm going to go back and write songs for Bill Rice. You know, I mean, I'm on this tour because I got a #1 record here. It ain't #1 in the United States.
Right.
So we were getting ready to get on the plane, and Roy was kind of sitting over to himself, and I walked over to him and I said, Roy, Bucky tells me that you'd like to use him on a set, and he said, Jerry, I don't want to do anything that would upset you or, you know, make you feel bad or anything. I said, are you kidding me? When I get through with this tour, I'm going back to Nashville and try to write some more hits with Bill Rice. I said, Bucky, he's just doing this tour with me. And I said, man, if you can use him, I said, you would be really smart to consider keeping him once this tour is over. He did, and Bucky stayed with him. That tour was in 1982, and I think Roy died in 1989. Bucky stayed with him until 6 months before he died.
Wow.
Yeah, great gig for him, man, and a good guitar player for Orbison, because Bucky's just a heck of a guitar player.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about some of these old things with DJ and Scotty Moore and stuff. Let me throw a name out. I met this guy a few years ago, but he hung out with that group. And, you know, in the business, Jerry, we get a lot of people saying, well, so-and-so played with so-and-so, and then you find out they weren't even close. They weren't even in the right years.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But this gentleman was giving me names and dates, and people that's been in the business said, oh, yeah, the dude was a real deal. Have you ever heard of Harold Skidmore?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
that doesn't mean he's not real.
Because him and DJ used to hang together. Their wives died about the same time frame. Harold moved here, but Harold played with Elvis when Elvis was 14.
a long time ago.
He's played with everybody and their dog. He's got write-ups and manuals out there. But I didn't know if your paths crossed with Harold.
Never did.
He's part of our folklore with this radio station. We do some
Wow.
things in remembrance of Harold. But I didn't know if you knew Skid. He went by Skid. He was 90. Oh, was
He
he
was
90?
up there. He was up there.
92 when I met him, and passed away not long after that.
Wow.
But he sat in my guitar shop and told me stories after stories of him and Johnny, Sun's record execs, and all these people. Names, dates, places, didn't forget a thing. Just a great guy. But I didn't know if your paths crossed with him.
No, but one of my favorite people from that era, when my first record came out and was moving pretty good, I did some tours with Perkins.
Okay.
And Perkins and I became really good friends. In fact, he cut 2 of my songs later.
Right.
But I've got 24 talk music television shows that I hosted in a can. They're 30-minute shows. And Perkins, the first guest was Hoyt Axton, and then Perkins did the next 2 shows. He came to do 1, he stayed and did 2. But I had Farron Young, I had George Strait, Johnny Rodriguez. I mean, everybody that was big in '82 did that show. It was supposed to be the flagship show for CMT, and it was called CMTV when they first went on. And the guy that actually was the producer of that and actually launched CMT was a guy named, we called him Big Daddy, was Glenn Daniels Sr. And he thought they were kind of cheating him, some of the people that had, one of his investors out of Denver or someplace. And he said, Jerry, I'm not going to give them your show. He said, I'm going to wait, I'm going to start another network, and I'm going to just sell the stock I got in this one and start another network. And he said, I want that to be the flagship show of on the new network. And I said, okay, well, Big Daddy weighed at one time 650 pounds. By then he'd lost down to about 450. And he died. He was 52 years old. And that show has been in the vault all this time. And his son has found them.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So who knows? You know, I got black hair in those days.
Now, I'm going to ask a question that you may have to think about.
Okay.
How many songs have you had cut?
I've had 200 chart.
200 chart.
Yeah, we got chart busters. The reason I know that is ASCAP, when we used to, if you had a chart record, they gave you it was a kind of a document they had, and we had ours framed. And I've got 200 of those. And I think counting album cuts, we've had right at 400 recorded.
Wow.
Yeah. But we wrote a lot of songs.
Jerry, I need to write with you.
But it was Bill Rice and I.
He'll write out your grocery list. What do you write out?
It was really funny. We were doing shows. We both had records out before we ever met, and we got booked on a show at the Jewel Theater in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And I think Charlie, whoever had Tongue Tied Jill was on Sun or something. I can't remember what his name was that guest. We also worked that with Charlie Rich a time or two, but we kept getting booked together at high schools and theaters and stuff. Well, Bill was getting ready to go to Memphis to record, and he was on Dot Records. And he said, I said, you got all your songs? And he said, well, do you have anything you might want to play me? And I said, I got a tape in the car. And so played him tape, and he said, yeah, man. He said, I'd like to take a whack at that. So I didn't see him for probably 2 months later when we got booked at a high school, and we were backstage. I said, Bill, did you cut any of those songs? He said, yeah, man, I did. He said, but Jerry, I got to tell you something, man. Didn't realize it until I got in the studio. He said, your songs are great lyrics, but all your melodies sound alike. And I said, sing me something you wrote. And so he did, and I said, Bill, it's a great melody, but a third grader could write better lyrics than that. And that's what launched the team. We decided to put it together, and I wanted to get off the road, and I got a job. I still work on the road, but I got a job at a radio station as a jock. And Bill told me he had experience. He didn't, but he told me he did. I think he had experience doing what we're doing now, being a guest on the show or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, the boss was out of town, and I hired Bill. And this was when President Kennedy got killed, because the boss was in Dallas getting his first-class ticket when that happened.
Oh, okay.
So he was out, and I was running the station, and I hired Bill. And he moved across the alley from me on a deserted airbase. And it was really weird, because we'd keep the neighbors up. We bought a piano that was an old upright for $10 and painted it pink. Put it in his back. Well, we write rockabilly, man. So we put it in his back bedroom, and people say, boy, I hope you guys do something pretty soon, because we can't sleep. They got day gigs. Bill up at 3 o'clock in the morning having on that keyboard, you know, and we're still doing shows together, and I wound up getting a television show, and Bill played piano on the show and put a little band together, and one thing led to another, you know, but our relationship, we had written together for 5 years, and we kind of had a handshake, and it was really funny how we did things. The reason it became Foster and Rise instead of Rise and Foster is we flipped a coin. And it didn't matter to us which way it came down. We said, okay, we need to name it something. So, you know, heads it's Foster and Rice, and tails it's Rice and Foster, you know. And so that's the way it came up, and we became Foster and Rice. Wow. Yeah, I used to get mail addressed to Jerry Rice, and he'd get it to Bill Foster once in a while. But it was a really good ride. For 18 years we wrote together, and we went in the 70s. We went for 7 years without ever being out of the charts. Wow! And at one time we had 10 songs in the single charts at one time.
There's not many writers that can say that.
Well, it's never been done before.
Yeah.
Or since. So
how many different artists was that? You said 7.
It was 10 artists, 10 different artists.
10 different artists. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We had the number one record that week, and then some new ones just coming in, and some that had been up the top of the charts were falling, so they were kind of crashing in the middle. And I didn't know it. I'd walked across the street to Mercury, where I used to record, and Frank Mull was the national promotion man, and Rice and I had just taken a little break from the writer's room, and so I said, Frank, what are you doing? He was highlighting a chart from Billboard. And he said, we got the number one record this week. And he said, anytime we have the number one record, we highlight it and laminate it, and it goes on the wall. We frame it. I said, oh, that's cool. I looked, and the number one record was ours. And he said, Mercury's got 3 songs in the charts this week. And I was looking at the accountant, and I said, Frank, Rice and I got 10 songs in the charts this week. And he said, what? He counted them. He said, I'll be darned. So I walked across the street and said, Bill, you know how many songs we got in the charts this week? And he said, no, man. I said, 10. He said, oh, really? Hey, Foss, listen to this. And he started messing with it. I thought, well, ain't nothing to it. So I never thought anything more about it until when we went in the Hall of Fame, they mentioned it, that
Wow.
we had done that, you know.
Wow.
Now, do you have a favorite song of all of what you've written?
That's like asking me which kid do I love the best.
Right.
I don't know. I could check the royalty statements and tell you. Pretty quick. We had a song, and it's really, I'm not even sure I could do it, but it was a song. I did a show. I was a guest at a radio station in Cypress Gardens, Florida, and I went to a water festival before it was over. Boy, there's some fancy water skiing down there. But whoever the MC was, he said, we got a songwriter with us today. And I thought, oh God, they're going to introduce me. And he said, this guy's written songs for Barbara Streisand and Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. And I thought, whew, it ain't me. And he called my name. And I stood up, and guy behind me said, you've written songs for all those people? And I said, yeah, none of them cut any of them, but I wrote it for all of them, yeah. I said, but I did have a hit with Sonny and Cher on Someone to Give My Love. No, When You Say Love. They covered Bob Luman, and Bob had a big country record with it, and this was a big pop record. But anyway, I went to the radio station after the show was over for an interview. And while we were doing the interview, we were taking phone calls from some people who were calling in, asking questions about songs and artists I knew and things. And the sun went down, and when it did, the signal went out further. And we got a call, and this young lady said, I'd like to thank you for a song you wrote. And I said, well, you're welcome, I'm sure. And she said, let me tell you why it's special to me. And I said, okay. And she said, I think she said she was 15 years old. And she said, I got pregnant. And she said, my parents disowned me. And she said, I checked into a motel, and I had the whiskey and I had the pills, and I was going to kill myself. And she said, but the radio was on. And she said, this song came on. And she said, because of that song, my parents are the proudest grandparents of the prettiest little girl you ever saw. And I have trouble with this every time because it chokes me up. Because to me, that's the most important song I ever wrote. It saved 2 lives. And it wasn't the biggest song we ever wrote. It was an award winner, but I think somewhere in the 20s maybe. But Pearl Husky did it. And it was called Rosie Cries a Lot. And I don't even know how she equated with the song. It doesn't matter, she did. So good Lord works.
Powerful.
Well, the good Lord works in strange ways, and so for something in that song touched her, and she said because of that she flushed the pills and the whiskey. And she's talking about her parents just loved the little girl to death.
Great story. Yeah, just music is powerful.
It is, and you don't realize it when you're doing it.
Yes.
No. I had a song that Rice and I wrote. Let me see if I can do this for you. I'm not sure I can. But this was a hit for Nat Stuckey.
Okay.
And I loved the way he sang. And he was also really a super songwriter, too. I got to see if I can do this. How long since you called her up without a special reason? Told her that you thought of her. I'm going to put this in B. 'Cause love, well, it's on your mind. And how long since you brought her gifts when there was no occasion to let her know that her love grows sweeter all the time. Take time to love her. 4 days at home and nights alone are the kind of things that she don't understand. Take time to love her, or someone else who has more time will come along and take her off your hands. How long since you took her out and danced with her till morning and brought her pretty roses the way you used to do? How long since you showed her how much she was wanted? And have you shown her lately how much she means to you? Take time to love her. 4 days at home and nights alone are the kind of things that she don't understand. Take time to love her, or someone else who has more time will come along and take her off your hand. Let that be a lesson to the guys. If you don't do that, you used to do it.
What I find amazing is I grew up dreaming of country music and listening to it and mimicking, and I didn't realize how many songs of yours I knew.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel honored that you do some of the stuff that, well, most of the stuff Bill and I wrote. Like I said, we had 24 cuts on Paycheck. And the funny thing was, one day he was getting ready to record, and Billy Sherrill, who was his producer, called our publisher, and he said, are the boys there? And he said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm going to send Paycheck over. He said, I got a session, and I don't have a thing that I think works for him. And he said, I'm going to send him over there and let him see if he can find something over there we might record. And he was going to cut at 6 o'clock. And so it was about 9:30 in the morning. So he sent Paycheck over, and we played him some songs. He'd say, I like that, I like that, I like that, I like that. So he picked out 4 things. And now it's about 12:30, 1 o'clock. And so we got to go over to Billy's office and play him this stuff. So Rice took the guitar, and I took a flare pen and a legal pad in case something he liked might need a line change or something to make it flow. And so Billy's sitting behind his desk Indian style with his legs up under him. And he said, there's this stack of tapes, those 7.5 reel-to-reels, stack about that high, all the way around his desk, on the front of it, sides. And he said, what do you got? So we said, well, Paycheck liked this song, so Check singing the first song. The kiss of death in those days was if a producer said, what else have you got? And I thought, and that's what he said. After Paycheck sang it, he said, what else have you got? And I thought that was the best shot we had. We're done here. And he said, well, yeah, I got another thing. So he sung him that. And he said, what else you got? And I thought, we're going downhill really fast here. So he sung him the third song, and he said, tell me you have something else. And Paycheck said, yeah, we got one more song, but I don't know it real well, but if you like it, I'll have it ready to go by 6 o'clock by the session. And he said, sing it. So Paycheck sung it. And when he finished it, Billy reached up and raked all those tapes off on the floor, and he said, there's your session. And all 4 of them were hits. And the last one that he sung, he didn't quite know it yet. So when he recorded it, he phrased the first line wrong. And everybody that's got it since then has phrased the first line wrong. That's Paycheck did. If I got time to do it,
Sure.
real quick. So this was the last one. And it had been recorded. Benny Barnes cut this song first. And he was on a little label. I went to the DJ convention that year, and they said, if he was on a big label, that's a smash song for him. And then that was in like 62 or 63. And then in 68, Carl and Pearl Butler did it, charted it in the 60s somewhere. Then Paycheck came along, and that's the first time anybody hit with it. You brushed by me, and oh, you came so near. And I could smell the perfume in your hair. An old memory took me back in time, and my heart stood still for a minute there. For a minute there, I forgot where I was, remembering only when you used to care. And as you walked by me, you almost touched my arm. I nearly called your name for a minute there. The man beside you looked so satisfied, knowing that's his wedding ring you wear. It cost him nothing for a lifetime in your arms, but I'd give all I own for just 1 minute there. There you go. My Lord, boys, I didn't mean to keep you this long.
Oh no,
Oh, no, you're fine.
We still got 20 minutes to go.
We do?
Yeah, we can do 20 before they kick us out of here. Just to let everybody know that you're listening to Mr. Jerry Foster. Now, Jerry, you brought a special person with you today.
Yes.
Why don't you tell a little story about where you met, how you met, and how long
Okay.
you've been together?
Well, we've been together a little over 3 years,
Okay.
and I met her at the Commodore, where I work a lot. And she'd been there before, but I'd never seen her before. It was Bert Gagnon had come in from Connecticut. He was a jock up there,
Okay.
and he'd come in to meet some of the people who had CDs. They had given him CDs to play, and he
Okay.
played their music. And so I'm sitting talking to him, and I'm sitting pretty close to the stage, and I kept looking around him because I saw her, and she sat back where I was when you guys sat right behind me. Okay?
Right. You notice he said where we sat behind him.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I told everybody that you sat next to us, that's you knew where the VIP seats were, and he done it twice, just so you guys know. Sorry.
Well, you got to understand the magic of that post.
Yeah.
She was sitting in front of that post, and I thought that she was probably waiting on her husband or something like that. She was a guest at the hotel because I'd never seen her there before.
Mhm.
And oddly enough, Alan Carl and Dixie Harrison were there, and the only song I remember singing, and it was simply because at the break, Alan came up and said, "Who's cut that song?" And I said, "No one." He said, "Can I cut that song?" And I said, "Sure." And I gave him a copy of it. That's the only reason I remember what I sang that night. I hardly remember being on the stage because every time I'd look at her, I kept wondering, who is the dumb guy that's left this pretty woman sitting by herself in this place? That's crazy. So nobody showed up. And so finally, my curiosity got the best of me, and so I just went around, and she says it better than I do. And she thought it was a line. It wasn't. I was really wondering who she was, and I said, "Who are you?" And then she told me her name, and I said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "I live here." And I said, "You got to be kidding." So we started talking, and we got to kidding with each other, and both of us had a sense of humor. And she laughed easy, and she could dish it out as well as she could take it.
There you go.
And she was there to see Marshan, who's a friend of hers, and she wound up taking a picture that night of Sharon and I talking, and we've still got that picture. 8 years ago. What did I say? No, I said we've been married 3 years. Oh yeah, okay. See, that's why I keep her around.
Sounds like there's a song in that.
Let me tell you something, boy. When you're getting Anheuser's, I mean, you're gonna have somebody remember something, you know. But we've been together ever since, and it just was one of those magic moments that just happened, you know. And she's been really an inspiration to me, and she takes good care of me. She makes sure that I look halfway decent when I go somewhere, and so.
Well, that's good. Andy, you got a segue there real quick. Why don't you go ahead and mention that before we get to the end of the show? What's going on this weekend?
Well, at our VFW in McMinnville, Tennessee, we have the Blazing Family Music Festival. And this is going to be a charity event for the special games and Helping Hands Ministry. We're going to be having the Music City Hayride out of Nashville come in. Dean Holman, the CEO of that, who assists veterans with different charities. But this particular show itself is going to be featuring Randall Franks, who's a International Bluegrass Hall of Fame member, who was also on In the Heat of the Night with Carol O'Connor. He's going to be there playing some music and talking about his life, and also we're going to have several other entertainers. One which Jerry mentioned, Alan Carl and Jerry Thomas, Dean Holman, Lane Smith, and Donna Cunningham. And also, we're going to have a couple other artists that will be entertaining folks that day outside, because this is going to be starting at 11 o'clock, and it'll end at 10 that night. There'll be events outside for children and for families. There'll be vendors and music, and we're going to have some light entertainment after a singing competition for kids ages 5 to 17. The entertainment that'll be featured between the show will be Jason Adams, Trinidad Ramirez, Kevin Myers, Paul Cicero, and there was one other artist, and I'm sorry I'm failing to remember their name, but there are going to be a couple of artists there that'll be singing. And also we're going to have Ma Bell there, who's a really funny individual, as far as karaoke. But the event, like I said, it starts at 11, and the Music City Hayride show will begin at 8 and end at 10 inside the auditorium there at the VFW, because
In McMinnville.
In McMinnville, Tennessee. And you can go to 3340 Sparta Highway and reach us at the Facebook if you want to get more information and directions to that event. But from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock that night, the Music City Hayride show will be there. It's $10 per person, and it's $25 for a family of 3 or more. Break that down, it's only $5 per person. So it's for everyone. It's a family event. It's something that the Post is wanting to do to get the community back and get involved there at our local Post.
And also, WFMC Jams will be there putting that out over live.
Correct.
Throughout the whole day. So we'll be emceeing it. Jason and I and the other gentleman that's on there from the Heat of the Night, I guess, are all going to be kind of emceeing the event. So if you got nothing going on, get up there to McMinnville, check out the event there at the VFW. And then if you're too far away, if you're one of our international friends and family out there, check it out. We're going to go from Nashville time. It'll be 11 o'clock until 10 p.m. Central Time. So check it out. You'll get to hear some great live music, a lot of music all day long. And, of course, that's what we're all about is music. So.
Food, vendors, fun. You can't beat it. If it's weather's hot, you can go inside. It's just going to be a great day. And like I say, you're not going to find this kind of talent down in McMinnville, Tennessee.
Is that why they hired me?
That's why they hired Jason.
Oh, my goodness.
That just piqued the competition.
But the best in traditional country music and just music overall is going to be there at our VFW. So come on out and join us.
Another nice segue, though. We're talking about McMinnville, Tennessee, home of Dottie West. You were family members with Dottie West.
Yes, and I'm just tickled to death that she's going in the Hall of Fame this year. Long overdue.
Yes.
She blazed the trail for a lot of female singers in country music, that went in ahead of her. And I really think that Dottie, that's well deserved.
Oh, definitely.
And you bring that up, and it gives me goosebumps, because there was a gentleman, his name was Cowboy Bob Reed, and he was a DJ down in McMinnville. And, he was known in different areas. He was in the service as well. But he and Dottie were close friends in high school, and he was there with her when they graduated. And, of course, he passed away, and it's just kind of hard to think about the fact that he's not around to see this and what's happening. Because it was he and Dottie, and he told me one time, he said that she told him one day that she's going to be famous, and Cowboy Bob, he's going to be a good radio disc jockey as well, and he's going to make it big as well.
She got on to me one day. We were up at WSM, and we were promoting Fanfare. And she said, Jerry, how come you haven't brought me a song? And I said, Dottie, I'd feel kind of weird about that because I don't want to take advantage of family. And she said, you write hit songs, I record for RCA, you get your rear end busy and give me a song. And I took her one song, and she cut it. It was an award winner. It's called "Lonely Is." And I never took her another one. I just thought, okay. But Dottie liked to cook for everybody. She was just, everybody that knew her loved her. She brought Larry Gatlin to town, and she brought Steve Wariner to town. And I told her one time, I said, Dottie, you're batting 500. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Now, the Ernest Tubbs Record Shop down there on Broadway in Nashville, I don't know if they have it on display now, but Terry, who runs the place there, he had a back room where they're redoing the stage there. And so a lot of stuff that was on the old stage, they put in a back room, kind of just protect it, make sure it's out of the way while they're remodeling. But he took it back there, and one of Dottie's clothes that she wore in a Coca-Cola commercial, that outfit she has, is still there. And it's on a mannequin. They're going to put it out on the stage and stuff. But I got to see one of Dottie's clothes. Because if you ever find the Coke commercial, and it's probably on YouTube somewhere, they've got that outfit at the Ernest Tubbs Record Shop down there.
Now,
And we got pictures of it on our Facebook. Jason was going to wear it, but he's a little.
I would have looked awful funny.
Yeah, we didn't want to do her disservice.
We do a vinyl show once a month. We sit and play records. And matter of fact, we have made you maybe a nickel or two from our shows.
Yep.
Well, don't think I don't appreciate it.
3/10 of a nickel,
3/10,
probably.
yeah,
Yeah.
something.
You know
I
how
actually
that
was
goes.
listening to Heat FM. They were doing one of the old vinyl shows here recently. And
Thank you, Chris.
there was one we did at the Last Chance Saloon. So this was, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, a year and a half at least.
Year and a half. And Jerry was going to play the Commodore that night. It was brought up, and we played. It was a 50s and 60s show,
Okay.
and we played Charlie Pride's Easy Parts over and dedicated it for Jerry since he was going to be there that night.
I appreciate that.
Pretty
Charlie-
cool. And again, we probably played a lot of his stuff on vinyl
We
from the different artists. See, Jason knows all you guys. He knows every one of you guys. And I'm an old rock and roller. I grew up, that side of the story. So when you start talking, about Jerry Lee Lewis and those guys, I mean, I appreciate that, and I probably heard a lot of your stuff on that side.
Yep.
But when you start talking about Johnny Paycheck and stuff, I didn't get into Johnny Paycheck until many, 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 many years later. But when we sit with Jason and he starts playing albums, he goes, "Oh, this is so and so, and this is so and so," I'm like, he just knows all that.
What upsets them is they can sit across the room and pull a record. I can tell them what it is.
Yes.
Well, I had a.
Except for this next one, we don't want to. This next one's
Really,
kind of scary.
Mark, you can't remember. Take his job and shut.
Oh, I remember that. That's what I
I
say.
mean,
I
come
remember
on.
later
You know, I
stuff.
mean,
Later, Johnny Paycheck. I played with one of Johnny's bass players at the end of Johnny's tour there at the time. Trust me, I played that song over and over. Just like we do Wagon Wheel.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
So I played some of that stuff.
David Allen co-wrote that.
Yes.
Take this job and shut
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yep. So
I had cuts on Someone to Give My Love To by Joe Simon,
okay.
and Bobby Blue Bland did it. And that was really strange when Bobby did it, because the first label I was on, Bobby, the guy that owned Backbeat Records also owned Peacock and Duke. And Bobby was on Duke, he and Little Junior Parker. So I got to jam with them. When I went down to record, they had 13-piece bands, man. Whew. And I wound up touring some with Lloyd Price and Fats Domino. And they had big bands. It was really crazy. And Lloyd told me, he said, every time, he and Fats Domino were great friends. And he said, Vic was his drummer, and he said every time they'd get together, Lloyd would get Vic off the side and say, "How much you making?" He'd tell him, he said, "I give you $5 more, you come to work for me." And Vic would go, then 2 weeks later, Lloyd would say, "How much is he paying you now?" "I'll give you $5 more." Vic was playing them $5 at a time, and they were good friends. They were doing it to just mess with each other. But a band that big, man,
Oh, yeah.
And when I played right outside of Baltimore with Lloyd, and he put us in a hotel called the Dunbar. And so the drummer, Vic, he asked me, he said, "Jerry, where'd you stay last night?" And I said, "I stayed at the Dunbar." He said, "Why'd you stay at the Dunbar, man?" And I said, "Well, that's where Lloyd put us." He said, "Man, it rains bodies down there." And I said, "What?" Thanks, Lloyd.
We've got time for probably one more song.
Okay. Well, if we want to do one more song, you want to play one more song, or do you want to play one off the record or something?
Yeah,
I
play
preferred
one.
hearing him play live.
I
That's
like
up
it when he
to him.
plays live too. What?
Well, I'm trying to think of something to sing. Let me check my.
You got that, yeah. He's only got 400 to scan through.
I got
bless his
this. I got this list. Oh, here we are. This was a hit for Randy Travis. I've walked 1,000,000 miles across this road, but I never have quite made it to the door. I never thought the time would come I'd ever see this day when you could make me feel so thrown away. I'm feeling like an old pair of shoes, all worn out from walking through these blues. There's a hole in my soul and I'm really feeling used. I'm just like an old pair of shoes. You've always been my one and only love. It ain't no easy thing to give you up. Looking back, I'm feeling like there's not much left to lose. This time I might just walk out on you, 'cause I'm feeling like an old pair of shoes, all worn out from walking through these blues. There's a hole in my soul and I'm really feeling used. I'm just like an old pair of shoes. And there you got it. Thank you.
Very, very nice.
Thank you.
Well, Jerry, you've been in the business for a little while, more than a couple of years. Is there an artist or a songwriter or somebody that you never had a chance to meet that you just wished you did? Is there somebody that, like the one that got away? And not
He just
that-
met me.
Yeah, I tell you who.
Okay.
To me, the greatest voice in music, as far as I know,
Mhm.
for me, was a guy named Sam Cooke.
Oh, yeah.
And I never got to meet Sam Cooke. And he got killed when he was like 21 or something. But
Yes, very young.
yeah, he was very young. But he and Brooke Benton were two of my favorite people when I was getting into the music business. And actually, I did get to talk to Brooke on the phone. I called him.
Mhm.
I was A&R for Cinnamon Records, and I offered him a record deal.
Mhm.
And he said, yeah, man. He said, oh, just send me $120,000. I'll sign right up. I said, Brooke, you're colder than yesterday's newspaper, man. I said, I just thought maybe we could rescue you. He said, well, I'll do it for you for $60,000. I said, no. If you want to tell jokes, I'll hang up and you call me back on your nickel. And he said, he said, are you prejudiced? I said, not in the studio. Couldn't I get over heroes real quick? And he said, man, you just send me the contract. And
Wow.
and I ran into a guy who used to produce him, and he said, you don't want to mess with him because he shows up, doesn't know the songs, and da-da-da-da-da. And I said, no, life's too short for that. And I'll be darned if his next record wasn't Rainy Night in Georgia.
Oh.
I knew he had another hit in him, man.
Wow.
But what a great voice. And I never really got to meet him personally, but I did get to talk to him on the phone. And I
Barter
never,
with him a little.
Yeah, but I never got to meet Sam Cooke. But I always wanted to meet him, man.
That's excellent. Yeah, for whatever reason, I was just reading about Sam the other night. And again, he's well before my generation, but what a great voice.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful
It was
voice.
an instrument. You
Yes.
know, I mean, that he could do anything with that voice.
Yeah. And again, just way, way too young.
Yeah.
Way too young. And I was always impressed with Sam Cooke. And I think Animal House kind of brought him back when they had one of his songs in Animal House, made a lot of us kind of realize who Sam Cooke was.
Well, you know, the Righteous Brothers got into a lot of stuff, too, with their music as far as, I think when they're in Top Gun and also in Ghost.
Yes.
Two major things, man.
Yeah,
You know?
it's just funny because sometimes those songs are phenomenal, and then they kind of get lost, and then they're put in some crazy movie,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, it brought
They're
this whole
back.
generation, like Forrest Gump, all them songs that just were my history. It was all
Yeah.
my soundtrack of my life at that time.
I got considered for a TV show one time.
Oh, I bet you did.
It was
but
Barney.
Barney, which is ironic because you got a microphone with a purple windscreen on it.
I want to thank you guys for inviting me down. I didn't mean to run over time. I didn't know we were doing that.
No, you're fine. We're so
But,
glad. What time do we got, Jason?
You got
Brian's
about-
probably going.
We're at time.
We're actually right at the time. So
That's the reason I'm telling you good night.
yes, Jerry, we'll want to thank you for spending time and being a part of our family with us, and we're going to see great things from you, from here on forward. And we're going to see a lot of you coming down the road. We're getting out there a little more often. So
I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much for the invite. I've had a good time. I'll
we
be back.
appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jerry. Brian, thank you so much for getting us on the World Wide Web as well as you do, and sounding great. To all of our viewers and listeners that was on WFNC Jam's Facebook page, checking out live. We were trying something new tonight, and I hope it worked out well and the sound was better. So for everybody that was part of the show tonight, between Brian, the IT Guru, the one in himself, Awesome Andy, we got back in the corner back there, we got Jason the Hibbert Heartthrob. Miss Velvet Presley showed up here a little later on. We didn't introduce her, but she's here. And I'm Mark the DJ Doctor. With thanks very much to Mr. Jerry Foster, we want to say goodnight, and we'll see you in the next show. Bye-bye.